You're listening to Story Struck. I'm Rachel, an editor and writing coach.
And I'm Nino, a ghostwriter and book coach. Welcome to our curious community where we dive into everything books and writing.
Now, let's get into the episode.
On today's episode, we are going to talk all about getting feedback in the early stages of your writing process before you even go to an editor. So this is going to be feedback that you're getting from maybe a writing buddy, a critique group, or beta readers. So it's going to be a really fun conversation about the types of feedback you can get, how to get it, and maybe the types of people that you don't want to trust to give you feedback.
Yes, we've had a lot of conversations about this with various people and clients and stuff, because a lot of times we think like I'll let anyone read my first chapter that I haven't edited yet, and I just have to tell them this is the rough draft and that's going to be fine. And then we're crushed when our friend who doesn't read fantasy at all reads our first fantasy chapter and they say, I don't understand anything that's going on. What is this thing? Like, not your demographic, babe. Also, way too early for just a random person to read it, right? However, if I give that first draft to Rachel, who understands the writing phases, who understands fantasy, who is a big reader of fantasy, she's going to do a great job at being like, oh, I see where you're going with this. That would be really cool in this and this and this. And I'm saying that because that was my literal experience as I sent it to one friend who was not a heavy reader and not a fiction or a fantasy reader. And I sent it to Rachel and I got two very different experiences.
Yeah, it's really incredible, like how the people that we ask for feedback and how they give it, what they're saying, if they're reading our genre, like there's just so many things. So why don't we start with maybe when you want to start asking for feedback? Because I think that's also an interesting point. Like when you were sharing your work, it was early. So like that's something to think about is how early are you in the process when you are asking for feedback? If this is a completely rough draft, right? Like it's just out and you've done nothing to it, that's probably not the point to send it to someone. It doesn't have to be perfectly polished, and it also depends who you're sending it to, the level of editing it should have. But those very first drafts they're rough, all right?
Yeah.
Like when we were doing our writing sketchbook and I shared like a random snippet. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the chapter that I had sent to you and my other friend was my fuck around and find out chapter. It was the first chapter and I was literally just exploring the world. And I fully knew, like, as a writer professionally who's gotten critique on the writing for years, it was not something that I was uncomfy with. And that's also, I think, a really good thing to keep in mind when you're looking at getting feedback and when to look at getting feedback. I fully knew that it was trash. I just wanted feedback on the placement, how you felt in the placement, where the story was starting and stuff. And the one person was utterly and completely confused. And you were like, okay, I see where you're going. This is really interesting. Like, I'm invested and stuff. But it was not, it actually, the chapter that I had sent you on this, it ended up being my like 33rd chapter of that book.
Okay.
So like, I was thinking this is where the book was starting. And that actual scene, I kept the scene with some polishes and some changes. I kept the scene and it ended up at like the 33rd chapter or whatever and stuff. But, for me, it was okay to share my writing that early because I was comfortable in sharing garbage. But for somebody who maybe is newer in writing, maybe they're a more sensitive person, maybe they're more, like who has a lot of rejection sensitivity and stuff, like that might not be a good choice. You might need to go through that thing a few times before you're like, okay, I'm ready for other eyes to see it. And that's okay. And that's a part of knowing when to share things, is knowing yourself and when you're able to hear the feedback and how polished you need that to be before you're prepared to hear the feedback.
Yes, absolutely. Because like last thing we want is you sharing your idea and your work and having it be in that early stage and then someone coming back and just tearing it apart and then you're just crushed and you're either like, I'm not doing that idea at all, or I'm just like a terrible writer and I'm not going to write for like 6 months. So I think, right, like it's if you want to share something early in stages, that would be a time like I would suggest kind of like Nino did of just like maybe one person or two people. Like I don't think that's necessarily the stuff you want to take to a critique group.
Mhm.
Because critique groups can be like a whole thing to navigate.
There
It's like,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, have that, like, trusted person that you can be like, "Hey, this is, like, rough stuff. I just, like, threw shit down. Like, can you just, like, look at it?" And so, like, I always say, no matter if you're giving this to one person, if you're giving something to a critique group or to beta readers, is always to preface it of what type of feedback you want. Be very specific. Because otherwise you're just going to have people throwing all different things at you. And you could be like, right now, I'm just really interested in this chapter I sent you of how do you think I did my character development in this chapter, right? And that's the only thing that I really want you to touch on. And you could even have like a list of questions that I only want these 3 questions about my character development in this chapter. Go. And that kind of limits the scope down of what you're getting feedback on, and it's going to be so much more helpful than having somebody look at 20 million things and try to cover all of the bases, and then you're feeling overwhelmed when you get all of this information back.
Yeah, I actually in my community, Story Weavers, we have a writers show and tell section. And in that I preface in the very beginning, like feel free to share your writing of any kind. And we've had people post poems, chapters, different things and stuff. But if you're looking for feedback, preface your work with I'm looking for feedback. I'm looking for feedback with this thing, like ask for it. And we have a no unsolicited feedback policy because, like, if you're just saying, oh, this was so great to read, then that's great. But if you jump in and you're like, I just feel like in this part that your character was saying stupid things, like we don't want that. And it's important because writing is inherently vulnerable, especially creative writing. It is inherently vulnerable. And it sometimes feels like it's a piece of us and a reflection of us. And different people handle feedback differently. And a lot of times we don't know how they're best going to handle that, how they're best going to receive the information. There are some people who need it so blunt and straightforward, no nonsense, no pretty words, just give it to me straight. And that's how they understand and receive it the best. And other people who you need to do the sandwich method, right? Here's the good, here's the improvements, and here's more good and stuff. They need that sandwich method. And just putting that feedback out for anyone to just respond to willy-nilly is a real roll of the dice. And I mean, we've known people who got feedback on their work and almost threw it out. And luckily, they didn't because they had a person in their corner to say, no, 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 I'm going to need you to go talk to a professional before you go and throw out your work. And then they were able to bring it out. And so it's so important to have that preface before you're like, hey, give me feedback, but on this specific thing. Because this is what I'm working on in this scene right now. This is just a messy first draft. Because, yeah, sometimes in those critique groups, like it can get very brutal, right? Because egos are involved. And comparison is the thief of joy. And so then there's a comparison game going on. And maybe your work is really awesome and someone's feeling insecure about theirs. And so then they want to kind of tear down yours. And it's not fair, but it does happen. So yeah, there's those are layers.
Yeah, and I think too, kind of along those lines of, we want to let them know exactly what type of feedback we want. If there's specific questions you want answered, have those down. That's always great. If there's a specific way you like feedback, also say that too. Be like, if you're the person who likes it brutal honest, just say, hey, be brutally honest. These are the questions I have about it. If that's not something you're cool with, you could say, I really appreciate the feedback. If you could give, an example with your feedback. So maybe like the character said something stupid, right? Like we want to be tactful of how we give feedback. And we really want to avoid, I think, I feel when we're giving feedback. And I think as writers, we kind of get in that mode, and we need to kind of get more in the mode of the reader versus us as the writer. So maybe if there was some kind of dialogue that didn't make sense, you could be like, the dialogue here seemed to contradict, how the character was behaving or blah, 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 in an earlier section. And just that slight tweak in the wording is not as accusatory or negative. Like, you're giving a rationale for it of, there was a disconnect between how they said this and how they were acting. And then you can see, well, yeah, you know what, that was intentional because, I wanted them to kind of be what they were doing and what they were thinking were different, but maybe that didn't come across enough to them as they were reading it. And so that kind of lets you know that maybe you need to go back and tweak your work. So kind of think about that as we are giving feedback to others, and as well to explain to people what type of feedback is helpful for you. And then when we're talking about the critique groups and things like that, kind of as, Nino mentioned earlier, it's really important to make sure that the people who are reading our work and giving us feedback are readers of our genre. Because we have seen this so many times. When I was a ghostwriter, I had a client send out what we were writing to, number one, to non-writers. So they were kind of like jumping the gun of like, I'm going to treat this like a beta reader, and we'll get to beta readers later. But they were like, oh, this person's not even a writer. I'm going to send this to them, and I'm going to send this to this person. And they did this without me like giving my advice yet about having people look at it. And one of them was like, okay, this is like really awful because there's like so many typos and errors, like I couldn't even get past it. And I'm like, all right, like we knew, like this is not pretty polished draft yet. Like this is us still working through things. So if you're sending it to a non-writer, they're going to be like, whoa. And if you are sending it to another writer, you can tell them, hey, this is still in rough draft stage. Ignore all the typos things. Those are going to be addressed later. We're just looking at content. But you want to make sure that whoever you're sharing it with, if it's a writer, is a writer in your genre. Because if you're sharing your fantasy with someone and they only like literary fiction is totally different in how it's written, conventions, everything from fantasy. And so if they don't read fantasy themselves or like fantasy, they're just going to compare it to their literary fiction and be like, what is this? Like, I don't like this. I don't connect with this. So you're not going to get that constructive feedback that is related to your genre conventions that you would get if you send it to another fantasy writer. And so I think that's something really important to think about too when we're in critique groups is, are the people in your critique groups writing in all different genres? And that's awesome. You get a lot of different perspectives, but you need to take that into account when you are receiving the feedback, because the feedback could be skewed based on what they like to read or what they like to write. They don't necessarily have to be writers of your genre, but they at least need to be readers of your genre for you to take that feedback at face value. Otherwise, take it with a
Right.
grain of salt because,
That's exactly what I was about to say.
say.
Yeah, take it with a grain of salt, right? Receive the feedback with your brain turned on, as one of our favorite
Mm-hmm.
YouTube psychologists like to say.
Yeah.
When you're receiving this feedback, understanding who it's coming from and how their view might be skewed. Because, for example, me as a queer feminist reading a straight romantasy in a dark fantasy kind of thing, the way I'm going to receive it and the feedback I'm going to give that has an issue with your borderline abusive, dark, masculine dude is going to be very different than your target demographic. There's a lot of dark romantasy I cannot get through. I cannot, because I hate the man so much that I cannot understand why the main character is so obsessed with him, And so, like, I'm not your girl for that, And understanding that if I'm giving feedback, me as a professional, I'm obviously not going to give harsh feedback on those things. But I also might not be the best person to tell you how the dynamic might be better between the male main character and the female main character, because that dynamic is not something that I'm comfortable in or do I enjoy reading. So somebody who is really into dark romantasy might be a better option for you in that space if that's where you're wanting the feedback. So yeah, I think that it is so important to understand that everyone's opinions are like buttholes. None of them are pretty. None of them are perfect. And we have to remember that.
Yes, absolutely. And everyone has one. Everyone has one. And
Everyone
they're
has
out there,
one,
they're all
especially
there.
nowadays.
Yeah, that's a really great point too. So, like, if you're coming to someone, so like if I was bringing my book to Nino and like I had, that kind of like that straight, heterosexual relationship, and you may not connect as much with that, I may then ask you instead about a different element versus the romantic element and be like, what do you think about the magic system in this chapter? Does that make sense? Because that you're going to be like, okay, yes, like I can get into the vibe of the magic system there. And I'm going to go ask somebody different about the romantic element within it that is, more my demographic for that book. So I think that's a cool way too, is to look at your network of people and see what do they like to read and what do they like to write. And can you ask, 2 or 3 different people in your writing critique group or your writing buddies to look at the same thing from a different lens? And you're going to get some really interesting feedback on different elements.
Yeah, and like if I have questions on character psychology, like you are my go-to. Rachel's got a background in psychology. You got a doctorate degree, right? So
Yeah.
like I'm like, ooh, I need some character psychology stuff to deep dive in. So my character is like this. Like, what do you think? Is that like a typical reaction for somebody with this background trauma and blah blah blah? So you're going to be my go-to person when it comes to a lot of things in relation to character development. But then, like if I'm like, oh, I don't know about the romantic element between my 2 female characters here, like I'm going to go maybe talk to my queer writing friends, like who are like, oh yeah, I was totally with a girl who was like that and blah, blah. And like, that might be a better avenue to get that feedback from. And also, I think the feedback for your story can also be asking somebody just verbally, like, hey, I was thinking about this with my character, and like, what are your thoughts on this and stuff like that. They don't actually have to read your work to get feedback, because like our works are under construction for a really long time. So they don't actually have to read any of your stuff for you to get a lot of great feedback that can feed your work and use as inspiration and use as development for your work before you actually show them the words on paper.
Absolutely. That is like something I love. Like Nino and I, we have like so many voice notes go back and forth. Oh my God, it's a scary number of voice
And
notes.
they're
Like when I
long,
delete
too.
our conversations, I'm like, oh my God, I had like, 3,000 things in like the past 2 weeks or something.
This is why we needed a podcast, because our voice notes were 20 minutes long. We're like, we should just make this a podcast episode.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I love that because we can just spitball ideas back and forth. And sometimes in the midst of like our like 10-minute tirade about our story idea, by the time we get to the end of it, we're like, oh, you know what? I just answered my own question.
Yep.
And so like all I've been saying, like, you don't even have to listen because like I just talked it out, but like you're more than welcome to listen. But it's sometimes just so helpful to have someone just to talk those ideas out with before you get it on the page. Or even if you've kind of written just something very small, just share that little small thing, read it aloud. And then, too, same thing, like when we share, back and forth with our voice notes, we might say, hey, I just need to like work this out, but like I don't really need anything for it. And it's like, okay, cool. I'll just tell you what I loved about it. Or it'll be like, I really like, could you give me like your feedback? Like, what do you think? And then we never are offended if the other person doesn't take what we were thinking because we're just giving more ideas. But if you don't want ideas, tell them I'm not really looking for feedback or a way to do it. Just kind of, what do you think about this, how I have it? Or I just want to share it. Because like we just, play off each other so well. Like we know each other by now. We're like, oh yeah, I loved that idea. That's cool. I'm going to take that element. The rest of it, no, it didn't really fit right for this one. But then next time I talk to you, I'm like, oh yes, that idea. Boom. Okay.
Yeah. And honestly, like that's where I think we have a feeling when we're starting our writing journey, when we're starting our authorship journey, that sometimes, we have to be real serious about it, right? To be so serious about, I got to go do the classes. I got to join these courses. I got to do this program. I got to, and I got to join this writers group. We get very, very serious about it. But like, where's the play? And whenever you have a writing buddy, it becomes playtime. Oh my God, I just had this thought about this thing and it's so exciting. And what do you think about it? And you're coming back to me and you're like, oh, I love that. And then what if it's this, right? It's like two kids coming together and planning their like fort. And that's what it's like. It's just like, oh my God, we could do this with the fort. It'd be so cool. We could have a tower. And, and it's a playtime. And that's where creativity really thrives. But we feel like we have to do these things because we have to be really serious about it. But you don't have to be really serious about it. Arguably, that can actually be a hindrance. And having a writing friend who understands your genre, who gets you and what you're trying to do is going along with the journey can do so much for your writing practice. And I understand, like, especially when you're first starting out, you're like, I don't know anyone who writes anything, let alone honing into my genre and stuff. That's where community comes in, right? That's where, joining those writing groups can help you to meet those writing buddies. Joining writing communities can help you meet writing buddies, but you have to allow yourself to connect with other authors. And it often feels like such a solitary journey that we don't think about the importance other people play in that creative thing because it's our work, right? It's our story that we're writing. So, we don't always think about how other people might be able to fit into it unless we're thinking about a book coach or an editor or somebody in a professional setting. But you don't have to have a professional person to have a partner to bounce ideas off of, to have somebody that can help you develop things. I just happen to be very lucky to have a brilliant writing buddy who is also a professional.
And me for you, who's a book coach, because, I think that's interesting too, is looking for someone for your writing buddy who also challenges you, not in like a bad way, but like kind of compliments you. So like I am very rigid and regimented. If I had another writing buddy who was another Virgo, we would never write anything.
Nothing would
we
ever
would just
happen.
be plotting everything to death and we would never write stuff because it would be going down more rabbit holes of the weather system and how that impacts the clothing, and then how does the clothing impact movement and fighting, and then okay, but then how does that also impact magic, because maybe they have like a mood ring that reacts to weather. I don't know, like, see, like we could just go down all these things and never write. And so like Nino gets me out of my box and is like, okay, Rachel, like just have a conversation, write like a little journal thing with your character and like do stuff. And I'm like, and then like it gets me out of that space. So I think like having someone who compliments you but challenges you in that fun way is really important. And I will say that like since starting this podcast, we have met so many incredible writers, and the writing community is like the sweetest, most supportive group of people I have ever met.
Yeah.
And so I would say don't be afraid to go out there. And like I'm very
Especially in
introverted.
fiction.
Especially
Also,
in fiction,
especially in fiction,
Especially
or just like
fiction.
standard fiction and stuff. I haven't met a whole lot of literary authors. Like,
Yeah.
they are just in it for the playtime.
Oh yeah, they love the playtime. They're so supportive of each other, and they're just like, yeah, like let's go, let's talk about these ideas. And if you're like me and you're like, I'm like scared of all these people and it's just too much and overwhelming, even if you kind of like lurk in like a Facebook group or something, if you don't have like a local community of writers, like I'm very rural, so I don't really have much here. So like looking online and finding them, you don't have to share in a large group if you're not comfortable with that, but you can just kind of interact, kind of be that, wallflower, and observe and see like, ooh, I really connected with the post that this person put in this writing community that I'm part of, and then just reach out to them one-on-one. and
Mhm.
start a conversation. And then you could develop, just some, very small, like one-on-one writing buddies, or maybe you find a couple people and the three of you decide to kind of connect and do things. It doesn't always have to be this big, huge critique group where you're on the spot and this panel of people sitting around dissecting your work. It
Ugh,
can be as
that
big or
sounds
small
so
as you
not
want
fun
it.
to me. That sounds so like the idea of going into like these writing because I there's one that's near me somewhere. I don't know. I was talking to a bookstore and there's a writing group, a critique group that meets near me, but I'm just like the idea of that doesn't sound fun to me. And then if I'm
No.
leaving my house, it's got to be fun or like a real strong obligation, you know? Like I'm not leaving my cozy little cat my little cozy habit hole here. Like for just anything. And so, those critique groups just don't sound fun to me. But, having I'm in these awesome like community groups that are online and I just loved them so much that I'm like, well, what if I had something like this, but it was for writing? And it was just like a really inexpensive thing that people could just do and like connect with other like spiritual writers who are writing different things and get connected with that more and stuff because I think like being a spiritual person and writer, I feel like they very very much go together, but a lot of people hold them separately and stuff. And so having that community has been really awesome to connect with other people who are like-minded and stuff. But if you decide that you're going to do whatever program or whatnot, like there's so many out there and stuff. In fact, I have one coming up, but you know, there might be a person in there that you just click with. And so being open and seeking those people can give you that kind of level of having that writing buddy. Because I keep thinking about Casey and Marisa and
Is it Marissa?
Melissa. Yeah. I'm
Melissa. There
trying
we
to
go.
read their
I know it's
book
like all the M's. I'm like, oh my goodness.
read their names across the room. But yeah, like I'm thinking about them, like how often have they fed off each other and supported each other? And the three of them have been like this dynamic trio of authors and stuff. And then also, how freaking cool would it be to just go along your publishing journey and marketing journey and stuff like that with your friends? Like living the dream. Actually, Casey has a new book coming out very soon. So,
Yay.
yeah, she's got the second in her series coming out this month. Actually, I have to double check with her, but there's a little drop in there for you. So, anywho, what are your thoughts on beta readers? Because I've done beta reading before, but I've never had a beta reader myself before. And usually people are like done with me by the time they're doing beta reader stuff. So, what are your thoughts on that? And like what phase and stuff?
Yes. All right. So your beta readers, you want to kind of get those. All right. So it depends. All right. So we have a couple tracks here. Okay. So you have beta readers who typically read your book for free. It's always nice, like if once your book is published, you send them a finished copy, right? Because they're giving you time and energy for that. And then there are some editors out there who do professional beta reading, which is paid beta reading, but it's even cheaper than like a manuscript review or things like that. So we'll go with the free route first. And for this one, you may start to like develop a pool of readers who just absolutely love your books and kind of become a part of your like street team to help like market and talk about your books and things like that. And they may be repeat beta readers for you down the road for future books. So when you are going for a beta reader, if you are going to a beta reader before you go to an editor for anything, I would again preface that with your beta readers so that they know this is still an earlier stage work. You want to have it cleaned up as much as you can when you send it to them. I don't want you spending a whole bunch of time worrying about the grammar goblins, but if you are reading through it before you send it to them and there's like something glaring in your face that like jars you out and it's like a thing you can fix in 2 seconds, like just fix it. But don't worry about going and checking off every single million things that, Grammarly or, the correction stuff is telling you to fix because you're going to rewrite stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do let them know what stage of the process it's in. And and be very clear with them, just as we were talking about with the feedback for your, writing partner or your critique groups who are looking at smaller sections of your work. Be very clear and create a little sheet for them that has it broken down of what you want. So maybe you're like, I would really love to know, if you could give me a couple sentences after each chapter of like your thoughts of the chapter. And then I, have these questions about, character, pacing, plot, or whatever it is. And don't give them too much crazy work to do. These people are reading it for free. Okay.
Yeah.
But
But
you do want to be
aren't
very
there like
clear.
also like programs and people who do it for like, they don't do it for a ton of money, but they do like you do pay them. I thought I saw something like
Yeah.
on social media or something like that to where there's a group of professional beta readers and they're just very fast readers.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So you have like those people who are just readers and who will read it. And then you have people who do professional beta reading. And so they do charge, an overall grand scheme of thing, a nominal amount, probably a few $100s to read your book. And you're going to get a little bit more high level feedback from them because they have done this a lot and they are used to giving feedback. They know how to give feedback. So that's kind of like your step up. So maybe when you're very first starting, maybe you do like a couple. And I would say I wouldn't go for more than 3 beta readers because you're
I
going to
agree. And
get
actually,
so much
that's
feedback.
what one of our favorite authors, TJ Klune, he has the same 3 beta readers and he shouts them out in his acknowledgments at the end of each book. And it's just the same 3. It's his core beta reading team. And they just read all of his stuff and give him lots of feedback and he raves about them.
Yeah, because that's great. Because then with 3, you can really take a look at, was this just something one person thought and the other person thought, or was this something more than one person thought of? If all 3 people are coming back with the same feedback, it's probably something you want to pay attention to. If it's something just one person's coming back with, take a look and see, does it really matter? 2 of them, okay, maybe that's a yellow flag. 3 of them, that's a red flag. So I think the 3 is just gives you a nice balance of being able to see, kind of what's going on with that. So your paid beta readers, that they're going to give you a little bit more high level feedback. They might already have a little bit of a structure, a form of how they give feedback. And then you also have editors like myself who may offer beta reading as a service, which is like a step below a manuscript evaluation. It's very light service level. And if you go that route, it's probably going to be maybe a little bit, not too much more than like your paid beta reader, but you're getting someone with that keen editor eye. So that's kind of like your 3 little tiers that you could go for getting feedback in those earlier stages. And then after you go through your editing with your editor, you do your self-editing based on that early beta feedback, and then you give it to your editor. Once you get it back from the editor and you implement your edits again, that could be another point if you have time and patience, and I think it would be a great idea before you put it to print to have some beta readers look at it again, because you have changed stuff in there. And if you have those same beta readers, or even just one of them that you had before, reread the book and kind of see, hey, this is the after. What are your thoughts? Did it address what you were thinking of and things like that? That could be so powerful. Like, I think we get so amped up that we need to have our books done yesterday and published yesterday that we forget that this is an art and that there's no race to the finish line. If you're under contract, then I'm sorry. Yes, you do have do get things done. But if you are doing this for yourself and you're putting self-imposed guidelines on for your finishing time, that could just be such a useful resource. And if you are on a deadline, plan ahead because all of this takes time.
Yeah.
You want to give
Yeah,
your
I know
beta
you've had
readers
some
like a month to
interesting.
read it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like don't expect them to read it in a week and give you detailed feedback. Like, people have lives.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
book
And
may be
also
a
like
fast
other
read, but
projects. Yeah.
yeah.
When do you think that first beta read should happen? Because in my head, I'm like, I would say after the developmental edit, because then you've gone through your book and you've seen the glaring problems and you've fixed the glaring problems. And now it's like, okay, developmental edits are done. Now I can send it off to a beta reader and then go through that next round of editing, depending on the feedback. Obviously, if they're like, hey, this is a big developmental problem that you missed, then you got to do a developmental edit again, and then to do it again after, you've had the copy edits done or the proofreading done, and then to have that second time. Is that what you would consider like the better times for beta readers to come in?
Yeah, I would say you definitely want to have completed your self edits first. You don't want to send them something that you just whipped out the draft and now here you go, you read it. You're going to go through and you're going to do your round of self editing first. If you can't afford to have a developmental editor at that time, then maybe that's when you go for a couple beta readers before you send it to a developmental editor to polish it up a little bit more. If a developmental edit expense is too much at that point, maybe consider going for a manuscript evaluation, which is kind of like the love child between like a beta reading and a developmental edit, because you're getting so much more feedback at like it's a much more economical price to fit into your budget, and that could be like your stepping stone for you. But yeah, I would say if you can, at least a manuscript evaluation. Your self edit, that's bar none, that's the base that must be
Yeah.
done. Your self edit must be done. If you can afford it, I would do a manuscript evaluation or a developmental edit. After that, then send it to your beta readers. Then the feedback you get from the beta readers, you can implement. If you're doing it that way, I don't think you need to have beta readers look at it again. But if you are not doing the developmental edit, which please do, please pay for it, it's well worth it, then you're going to probably want your beta readers to read it again after you go through if you're more DIYing it all the way through. That's kind of my thing that I would say. And at that point, they're maybe considered an alpha reader instead of a beta reader because they're looking at a book that in your mind is ready for publishing. And so those alpha readers then can catch anything glaring, and you might be sending them then a copy that's nice and clean in a PDF or a mock-up print book version for them to look at as well. So bare minimum, self-edit. Ideally, a manuscript evaluation or developmental edit, then it goes to your beta readers. Put your edits in, maybe send it some alpha readers. So that would be, in the ideal world, the way that you go. If you can't afford the developmental edit, please try to go for the manuscript evaluation and then use your beta readers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you know people, right, who are in the genre, like they are big readers of the genre, and you have people who are willing to read it for free, that could be a really good resource. But I think that the people who do it professionally, or who do it, like even if it's just like a professional side gig of theirs, that they just read so voraciously that it's totally fine. I think that is well worth the investment, because one of the things we talk about, right, with marketing is understanding your ideal target audience. And if your beta reader is within your target audience and you're paying them to give you that feedback, that is giving you valuable information to make it more successful. If you look at your book as a launch, just like we would a program or whatever in copywriting or in marketing, you need it to resonate with the right target audience in order to be a successful launch, in order for enough people to be like, this seems amazing, here, take my money, right? And so if you take that marketing perspective on your book, having somebody in your target demographic read it and give you information before it goes live to the public gives you valuable information to make that book launch more successful, right? However, you do have to think about, this is your art, this is your work, and their opinion might be misaligned with your work and what you're wanting for it, and that's totally fine. But it does still give you some really valuable insights in how your target audience might be reacting to certain elements in your book, and therefore it can impact the overall success of your book. If you're wanting to be this, selling a million copies kind of author, it could be something significant. If you're just wanting to put your work out there because it's your art and you want it read by the right people, then it doesn't may matter so much.
Yes, that's so important, is taking that feedback. It is ultimately your book. You can do whatever you want with your book. It's yours, it's your baby. But if you're getting that same feedback from every single person, then I would give that a little bit more attention and consider, all right, like maybe this is something that I really should consider changing, killing your darlings, whatever you want to call it. Those are the things I would really say pause and look at. Something just maybe one or two people said, whatever, if you love it, you keep it. All right. And something important you brought up, Nino, was treating this like a launch. So this isn't art, but it's also a business. Our book is a product. So the money that we are putting into our book, that is money towards our marketing and our sales of our book. Just because we wrote it, they're not going to find it. This is not Field of Dreams to put it out there and people are going to come. That's just not how it works. I wish it was. Writing a book is not Field of Dreams here, people. So think of also all of these expenses that you put in for your book. Those are all tax deductions as well. So even if you're just sending someone money over PayPal, like save that invoice, like write it on like a little note on there, like for beta reading, save your receipts, and those will be tax deductions at the end of the year for your author career. So, right, like you're save those, because once you start getting royalties and things coming in, you're going to have those expenses to put against that to lower your taxes. I'm not a tax person, but I'm a business person, and we save receipts for everything, and your author career is a business.
Yeah. And I think having that perspective, if you're a person who's looking at this like, oh, this is my art, it is so important. It's, but like if you want to make a really big impact with your art, if you want your art to reach a lot of people, you need to have a bit of a marketing mindset when it comes to getting your work out there. It's, I do believe in some manifestation, but you also need to put in that background work to it and put in that investment to it. We've seen a lot of people who have gone down the self-publishing or the hybrid publishing or indie publishing route who have not gotten their work out there to the point that they want to, because they were just like, well, I'm just a writer, and they haven't put themselves out there enough. And then, you have the other problem with the publishing industry, and anybody who has a platform gets a full-on traditional book deal, whether their book is good or not. It's a bit of a problem. So, there's that whole thing. But you do have to put some stuff out, some effort, investment beyond just the writing in order for your book to be read. Because the more people who read your book, the more people are going to be impacted by your book. And the more successful your author journey is going to be. We want more successful authors who are good and intentional and impactful.
Yes. And so look for your writing communities, whether it's local or online, and all of your writing buddies as well. Those are also going to be people that help in a sense of your marketing buddies, because we talk about each other's books to our people. Because even if I was some prolific author, people aren't going to read just my books. They're going to read a bunch of other books. So I'm going to recommend books that I like, authors I like, to my network, and they're going to do the same. And so we end up sharing our readers as well as getting writing partners, which is a lot of fun. And then for your beta readers, you can also Google that as well, of, looking for beta readers who read, romance or mystery, whatever it is. You'll find, people who do that for a fee. You could also look on groups online, reading groups and things like that. So if you're on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, and you find people who love books and you see that maybe they do book reviews on TikTok or, YouTube, and you really like their style, you can reach out and say, hey, I have this book. Would you like to beta read it? And things like that. There's lots of places to find your beta readers. Maybe even your local library has a book club and you're writing a style and a genre that they have a book club for. Go to the book club, engage with it. Get some contact information from those people, and they might be beta readers for you. So that's our 2 cents on getting feedback. And if you're looking for a community to join, we will have a link in the show notes for Nino's writing community, which is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, and we would love to have you in it. Thank you for listening. Check out the show notes for details and links from the episode. And don't forget to subscribe and follow for more. Special thanks to our composer, Micah Silverstein. Enjoy the rest of the music.